Hey gang, so at this stage in the game, we have Sally walk cycle, and she walks through the streets of Paris, or maybe you have a background that you have created to complement your own personal walk. And we have just learned how to create and use a mask. So, what we really need to do now is tie in a closing scene. And what my intention is for this mask is to do something like an iconic closeout that you would see from an old Looney Tunes commercial, where it's just sort of this fade to black, but it's done in this really simple circle shrinking down to nothing. And that will be our closing scene. And from there, it could be credits. You could type in the end, and we'll put in a replay button in which the viewer can click it and go back to the beginning of the animation. So we're going to recreate something like this. And since we know how to create a mask, what you'll probably need to know now is how to create a new scene. So let's get into that. So right here, what I'm looking at is the scene where Sally walks through the streets and the background moves. Sally walks in place and then eventually walks off the stage. Now, Flash has a unique way of handling larger files, and there's a lot of information in this on this stage right here that if we just continue adding on this timeline, this portion can get very big and bogged down, and we would end up with a lot more layers to keep track of. It makes things a little bit more confusing. So what I would like to do is have you create a new scene. And the easiest way to do that is to go to the scene window. Now, you might not have your scene window open like I do on my workspace, but it's easy enough to find. So first you need to go to your window button here up on the file bar, and here we're going to go down to other panels, and it's down towards the bottom, and in there you'll have quite a few like accessibility, history, scene, strings, web services. Really, we just want to focus on scene. Mine is already checked. If yours is not on your workspace, it will be unchecked. So you'll definitely have to go to other panels found in window up at the very top on the toolbar, click scene. And let me turn scene off and then turn it back on so you can see what it would look like. So it's just going to open up scene, and normally it'll probably open it up in its own little box right here, floating here. And just for a clean, minimized workspace, I'm going to click it and drag it back down into the bottom of my library panel. And I've already made a new scene and actually titled these scenes. So let's go ahead and make a new scene. And the really cool thing about creating a new scene is that it maintains all of the properties from the stage that you had made. So you don't have to go through and make sure the size is correct, or it maintains everything that the previous stage had. I created a new scene and called it end. And when I had the animation playback, it just sort of goes straight to this scene and plays it. So it sort of ties it in perfectly, seamlessly in with the previous scene. So I'm going to export it again, and you can see what I'm talking about. That in fact there's two scenes, but since there's two scenes in this project, Flash says, okay, when this scene ends, now play the next scene, which is just a simple fade out mask. Okay, but it's a little bit more work than just creating the mask layer. So let's go back here and just duplicate it. So I'm going to create a new scene. And so it's just like creating a new layer in the timeline panel. There is the same icon, and if you click it or hover over it, it'll say add scene. That's what you want to do, add scene. And we can come over here to the properties menu and see that our stage is exactly the same size, and that I have changed the background color from whatever it was previously now to black. And that just fulfills the purpose of what I intend to do with the mask. So I recommend that you do the same. Down back in the scene menu, we can see that it's just called simply scene 3. Now I did the one that I'm about to recreate, I called it N. And it's the same way as titling your layer. You can just double click it and change the name of it. Since I already have an N scene and it's kind of what I want, I'm going to leave this titled as scene 3. But please change the name of your new scene to End, and you might as well change the name of the previous scene, scene 1, to Walk. Okay, so right now this is highlighted and I'm working in scene 3, and there's nothing in my layers. To toggle back and forth between those layers or scenes, you just simply click on one of the scenes. So I'm going back to the Walk layer, and there's some things that I need to transfer over into our new ending scene, and basically that's everything except for Sally, because as we look here, she's no longer in the scene, she's no longer in the stage, it's just this information here. So what I want to do is I want to unlock everything and then lock Sally, because I definitely don't want Sally in there. And I'm going to grab these images, these symbols that I've created to populate this background and the stage. I'm going to grab them from the very end of the timeline. And the reason I'm doing that is that when I jump to scene 3, which there's nothing here, when I jump to scene 3, I don't want the background to jump or move or pop in any way. I want it to look seamless. I want it to look like you don't really notice the transition. And so if I click on the end that I have created previously, you can see that. Alright, let's go back. When I click on Walk, I'm at the very end of it, and then End. Oh my gosh, it's kind of frustrating. It doesn't jump other than disappear completely. Now that's just sort of a glitch. I'm going to save it. Maybe that'll prevent it from doing that. So if I go back to Walk, you can see that it didn't jump from the last scene to the very beginning of the end scene. I guess you'll have to take my word for it. And to do that, what I need to do is I need to copy and paste the information from the last frame of the Walk scene into the new ending scene. And to do that, it's just simply clicking, copying, and pasting into the new scene. So with that, let's go ahead and start from the very back and work our way to the front. The first one is the bottom of the stack. I have it titled as Night Sky. If I make it invisible, you can see that it encompasses everything from the gradation of the background and the stars that I've created. So I'm going to select this very last frame. Even though it's not a keyframe, it's still a frame. I'm going to select it, and I'm going to copy it using either Command-C for the Mac or Control-C for the PC. With it copied, I'm going to go to the new scene, and I'm going to paste it in place. A couple ways to do that. You can go to Edit, Paste in Place, which is either Shift Command V for the Mac or Shift Control V for the PC. And by doing so, it placed what I have just copied in the exact same place as it was in the previous scene. Simple enough. I'm going to lock this one, and I'm going to do the same with the background. Now this is a symbol, so it's not going to get all highlighted like it was, but you can see that it is in fact selected with the blue line over it. It's just a little obstructed by the layers in front of it. Again, I'm going to copy it using Command C for the Mac, Control C for the PC, and this time it needs its own layer. So why don't I create the layer, and let's be diligent about it, and I'll call this one Night Sky, just to stay accurate. And Command Shift V for the Mac, Control Shift V for PC, and there it is. So I'll go ahead and name this one again. This was the background. And lock it. Let's go ahead and be proactive and create a new layer and go back to the walk scene. Just grab the background, so now I want the midground. I want to grab it from the very last frame. Command C for Mac, Control C for PC. I don't know why it disappears like that, but it seems like when I adjust it with the mouse it comes back. And Shift Command V for the Mac, Shift Control V for the PC to paste in place. Name it midground. Lock it. Create a new layer. Go back to walk. Now this time I want to exclude Sally, because again we're not going to see her, and grab the foreground. And again I want to grab the last frame. Command C, Control C for PC, and Shift Command V or Shift Control V for the PC. Name it foreground. And lock it. And I do still want to grab the title action layer, just so I know where my safe areas are. When we export it, it'll make a big difference. So again, I'm going to Command C, Control C for PC, and make a new layer. Call it title actions, as in title and action saved, and paste it in place. Again, like we did last time, so it's not an actual visible layer, so we don't see it when we export our videos to Swifts. I'm going to right click on this one, the title and action save, and go to guide. And by clicking guide, it makes it a non-visible layer. So you don't see it whenever you export it to a Swift. You just see it when you're working on it as a helpful guide for visual reference. Now, one thing I want to reference the scene that I have already created called to end is that I have the timing all worked out. So the timing starts at 1 second. So at 1 second, the mask begins to animate from very large to very, very, very small. At 4 seconds, the total animation, the total frame count is 96. So let's go back to the scene, and let's start by creating 96 frames. So I go to the frame 96, highlight everything on my timeline and all the layers, and click hotkey F5 to add frames. Now, I don't want to animate anything except for the mask. And I don't want to mask everything. Well, I do want to mask everything except for the title action save. So on the timeline, I'm going to create a new layer in between the foreground and title action, and double click it, and I'll title this one mask so I know what it is. And zoom out a little bit. And this mask is going to be, it could be any shape. But instead of overcomplicating it, I'm just going to use a circle. hold down Shift and make a very large circle. And again, it doesn't matter what color it is for your mask. I'm going to delete the stroke and position it over the stage so it actually encompasses the whole stage. And the next thing I need to do is, with it selected, with the hotkey F8, make it a symbol. And I'm going to make it a movie clip just in case I eventually want to apply some sort of filter to it. And I'm going to name it mask. And since I already have one that I made previously, I'm going to call it mask_1, just so it doesn't get crazy in my library. In fact, I can always delete this one if I'm not going to use it. Now what we need to do is give it a couple keyframes in the timeline. Now if you recall from the last ending that I made, or what we were referencing, it doesn't begin to decrease in size until frame 24. So what I'm going to do is create a keyframe at frame 24 on just the mask layer using the hotkey F6, but I'm not going to make any adjustments yet. So it's going to stay the same. All this keyframe is saying at this point, start animating. The last keyframe was frame 96, so I'll put one here. And this keyframe, I will use the free transform tool and make the circle or mask layer extremely small. In fact, I'm going to zoom in and keep decreasing in size so it just sort of becomes a speck. And you can go in as far as Flash will let you, and just, that's as small a shape as I can make it. Good. I'll zoom out, and as I zoom out, you'll see that no one's going to see that. And go ahead and right click onto that timeline in between the second and third keyframe and hit create classic tween, and there you go. You have this circle that gets very, very small. The next thing we need to do is, first, you definitely want to save, because you don't want anything tragic to happen and Flash quit on you. I need to convert this mask layer into an actual mask layer. So I'm going to right click on the mask layer and go down to the selection that says mask, and immediately you'll see that the mask disappears, but so too does a portion of the foreground layer, and that's because the mask immediately affects the layer directly underneath it. But we also want it to affect the whole scene. We want it to make everything disappear when it gets smaller. So what I need to do is click a layer and then drag it into the mask layer. And I don't have to drag it very far. I just click it, and you can see that there's this little line with a circle that pops up. So if I bring it down, it's out. If I bring it up, it's in. So drag it up and in, and now everything is contained under that mask layer. And so when it decreases in size, it looks like everything is disappearing. So let's save it and replay back this whole animation, and you should have effectively created two scenes, so a multi-scene animation. Now we have Sally walking through Paris at night, and then scene end aligns seamlessly and masks out. And we'll come back to this and add more frames for the finale text and place for the button. But for now, this is a great stopping point. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send me an email. Address the class through Mighty Bell, and I look forward to seeing your progress in class. Thank you.